Hey, welcome back to the MWOD Hangout. We have an athlete and superstar that is going to blow your mind today. Now, if you know anything about the sort of the modern environment, modern sphere of venture athletics, what we have seen is guys are not just hucking themselves off big mountains anymore. They're climbing the mountains, filming it, skiing down. They're climbing Everest, skiing down. What we've seen is the evolution into the adventure athlete. And what's happened is that it's not just young kids hucking. It's about leveraging decades of practical experience as an athlete, technical experience as mountain athletes, and then putting that together into really profound expeditions, into profound boundary-spanning, boundary-pressing experiences. Today, kids, we have one of the coolest on the planet. His name is Gavin McClurg. Welcome, Gavin. Thank you so much for being on.
Thanks for having me, man. It's an honor. That was a hell of an intro.
Well, hang on to your butts because I just want to set up, because we'll talk about some of this, but you have the world record for human-powered flight where you hike up and fly in your paraglider. Is a paraglider is the right word, right?
Correct. Yep.
Wing, right? You have that record. You have competed in the Red Bull X-Alps, which is like the craziest adventure race in the world, where you can either run or fly, and you have to go as many miles as you can across the most brutal country in the scariest air. You have 2014 Co-Adventure of the Year with Will Gadd, friend of MWOD, for flying like 1 billion miles, 35 days, something ridiculous. Like you're the just hang on a sec. You're one of the pioneers of taking flying sports and wing-based human power and camping out of it, going expeditions out of it, which is mind-blowing to me. And you're all doing it, and you're 43. You have a history of like being a sick boater, climber, ski racer. Unbelievable. We want to get to how you're doing this all and kicking ass still, but I want to tell everyone how you came through. We randomly got through the MobilityWOD contact us page. Your coach was like, "Hey, I want to put this guy in your radar," and I knew who you were because of Will and what you guys had done together. We said, "Hey, by the way, some of the techniques that we've been using have helped this guy continue to press the boundaries of what's possible in human stuff." And we immediately got on the phone. We're like, "Let's have a talk." So, dude, welcome to the show. Thank you so much for hanging out with us.
Thanks a lot. Well, like I said, I appreciate being on here. It's a real honor. And, like we were talking before we opened up there, your book has gone everywhere around the world in the last 10 months. I can't say enough about it. I don't want to blow too much smoke around, but it's like Ben Abruzzo, the coach you're talking about, he owns a CrossFit gym down in Albuquerque. And when I approached him about doing this, at the time I was 42. I'm not a runner. I've never been a runner. I grew up ski racing, and I've had 9 knee surgeries on both my knees, and it's like a cartilage wasteland in there. And I approached him like, "Hey man, I want to do the X-Alps," and they bill this thing is the hardest adventure race on earth. There's a lot of hard adventure races, but it's just ridiculous. It's a race from Salzburg, Austria, Red Bull headquarters, to Monaco across the Alps, and it happens every 2 years. It started in 2003. No American until this year has ever made it, and it's you're either walking or flying, walking fast or flying or running, and the numbers are literally ridiculous. The average is 60 kilometers a day on the ground, so you're doing nearly 2 marathons a day on the ground. In this race, I climbed the height of Everest 5 times in 10 days. So 52,000 meters in 10 days. Like it's absurd to think that I could have ever even done it. And I contacted him well before a year, the start of the race, and said, "Hey, can you train me so I can do this? And I don't have any cartilage in my knees. How do we do it?" And he put me on the mobility program. We'll talk about all the training, I'm sure, but. I 498 kilometers on the ground, 52,000 meters of vertical gain, 1,600 kilometers in the air, 0 pain, none. Incredible. My feet were mangled, but that wasn't your fault, man.
We tried. We're like, dude, get some leopard paws, put them on.
God, my feet
We
were
know
trashed.
some of the best adventure racers in the world. My former C2 partner on the national team raced with Buff, ACG. He raced with Rebecca Rush, who I know you know.
Yeah,
And
my lives right down the road.
what's so weird?
Yeah.
Rebecca and my wife were on the Whitewater national team together, and so I first met Rebecca in Chile. Of course, it's like 1 degree of separation.
Yeah,
But
Chris Milius.
that's right. Crispy. I have crewed some adventure races for them, stayed up all night, and I have to tell you, like, I don't think people realize how long you go before you actually get the experience of being out there. Like, you can just grind and grind and grind, but it's this X-Alps race is 10 days. Is that right?
Well, it's actually so they give you 12 days to get there. I finished in 10 days. I ended up 8th place, which I was the first American to reach the raft. They call it. We land on a raft out in the ocean in the very last at the last turn point. But they keep making it harder every time. So the course gets harder, it gets longer, it gets way more dangerous in a sense in terms of how they route us across the Alps. So there's 10 turn points between Salzburg and Monaco that include like all the kind of legendary peaks like the Matterhorn and Mont Blanc, and so this course was really super hard. It was a little over 1,100 kilometers, and that's just straight line. Of course, you end up doing well over 2,000 with all the walking and flying and everything. But yeah, I mean, it's a totally preposterous race. The guy that invented it, Hannes Arch, is a Red Bull. He flies the planes through the courses. They call it the air races, and they call him the mastermind for coming up with this. It's a preposterous race, but God damn, it's fun. It was so fun.
It's amazing. The balance of managing the sleep deprivation plus the physical load plus extremely technical flying. Now, explain, just so we have some context. If we Google your name, we're going to see video and you talking about and some of the crazy flying you're doing. Give people a background of what this sport is, where it's becoming, because I think most people are maybe thinking about being towed behind a boat in Mexico or
parasailing
or it's wingsuiting, and they can't really understand how different and how technical and amazing the sport. So just give us a background a little for a second so that we can really appreciate what it means to fly 1,600 kilometers.
Yeah, so it's really interesting, the evolution of the sport, and it's really interesting where it has come in just the last few years. But basically, paragliding came out of a combination of hang gliding, which is a fixed wing kind of triangle that you've seen started in the 70s, and it basically started as a descent tool for alpine climbers. They were going down sucks and it's dangerous, and so they were like, God, wouldn't it be better if we could fly off? So paragliders started as these very they were very poor gliders. They were meant to get you down. They weren't meant to go forward. They were meant to go down and get people off peaks. And very quickly people realized that they had a lot more potential. And what they've basically become now is a collapsible hang glider. So they've got amazing gliding performances. So they really are an aircraft that doesn't have an engine. And the basic format, what we basically use is thermals. So we're using kind of a 4-dimensional space that you can't see to climb up as high as you can in the sky. It's like putting fuel in the tank of a car. Like every time we get a thermal, it's like fueling up, and then we can go on glide. If we get another thermal, you can keep going. So that's called cross-country paragliding, and for a long time, that's what we did. We hike up atop of a mountain or take a gondola in Europe or something, or a chairlift, huck off the hill and fly as far as you could. In the beginning, that just meant down to the parking lot or off the mountain. But as the glider's performance got better and people started realizing their potential, they started pushing it. Gliders kept getting better. And then now what we're doing, not a lot of people, this is a really niche part of the sport, is we're using them for what's called vol biv. This came from the French. Vol biv literally means fly camp. So you're putting everything in your pack that you need to survive, like on a backpacking trip, but super alpine, lightweight, not very comfortable type of camping. And we can go as far as our food and water allow. So like what I did with Will Gadd across the Canadian Rockies, it took us 35 days to do it, but we were 18 days on the expedition. So we would pack all our stuff in, and we stayed in the alpine pretty much the whole time. So rather than flying down to the bottom of a valley and then hiking up the next day, we would just land high in the alpine each day, camp and fly from the exact same place the next day. So our style there, because style is really important to Will, was that we couldn't make any forward progress unless we were in the air. So we could go down, we could go up, we could go back. You know, obviously we had to get water and provisions and that kind of thing. So at times we had to move with our feet, but for the most part, not for the most part, for the whole part, we connected everything in the air. So it was one continuous track log from McBride down to the U.S. border.
There are, you know, in my head, there are so many technical aspects to this, to the obviously the flying, the very technical flying. You were in Sun Valley, Idaho, which you describe as like the epicenter, one of the epicenters on the earth for the best, most technical, very sporty flying. It's very powerful flying, right?
Yeah, I would say it's probably one of the biggest big mountain air sites in the world. You know, there's, you know, certainly the Karakoram Range in Pakistan, and there's places in the Himalayas.
It's harder to live in Pakistan. It's true.
It's a little more, yeah, it's a little tougher. But I mean, the reason I moved here in 2012 was just to pursue what we call big air flying, big air mountain flying, and that just means that everything is stronger. So the winds are stronger, the climbs are stronger, the conditions, you know, like when you're flying in a jet plane and you get really, really turbulent air and everybody's freaking out and banging off the ceiling, that's what we're chasing. That's actually what we like. You want really unstable conditions, not so unstable that it overdevelops and, you know, you get thunderstorms like you see in the summer. Everybody's seen that no matter where they live, but you just want to be able to climb fast, which means you can go on glide faster and cover more ground. So that's kind of the coup d'etat. That's what we're all chasing, is big distance. But it's also, it's the aesthetics of it. You know, you're a paddler, I'm a paddler. You know, there is no better way in my mind to see the world than from the vantage point of a river. That's why we love it. It's a special place, and that's what flying is as well. It's such an aesthetic, cool way to see the world, because every time you fly, one, you have no idea where you're going. Even in the X-Alps, when you have turn points and you're on a race, you don't really know where you're going to end up. You might end up 5K, you might end up 250K. So you don't know, you know, so there's just a lot going on, and you're then flying over terrain where there's no place to land. And that's pretty committing, you know, where you're just like, shit, you better get another climb to get through this section. Especially with Will, when we did the expedition across Canada, there were like days where there was hours where there wasn't a place to land, and that's pretty.
You know, as a boater, you're always saying you always need to be able to stop. I mean, approach is a legitimate way to stop.
Yeah.
It seems like knowing where you're going to land is one of those hard, fast rules, and yet you guys have basically thrown that out and saying, hey, look, we know we're going to be able to put it down, or we're going to be technically enough that we can fly and leave those margins. Do you guys get the margins where you're like, holy crap, this is it, I'm landing in some trees? Is that, I mean, or is there's enough I mean, the boundary stuff, what you guys are doing in terms of some of these record breaking and races, it's got to be different than the typical experience, but it's pretty out there.
It's pretty out there. Yeah, you're right. The number one rule of cross-country paragliding: never fly over terrain where you can't land. I mean, that's what they teach you when you learn how to paraglide. You know, on the trip with Will, we had to break all those rules. But you're always trying to do it in a margin of safety. I mean, sure. Will is not adrenaline junkie. I maybe am a little bit more, but that's not. You know, there's no preservation of, you know, that what you learn when you start paragliding is how awesome it is. So the last thing I want to do is kill myself. If I couldn't do this, that would suck. And so you want to do it within a margin of safety, but you do sometimes have to really push that. There's no harder pushing though than the X-Alps. It was really interesting. The night I got to Monaco, I sat down with, you know, Aaron Duragati, who's the current world champion, and you know, Petio and Gerard and all these guys that are, you know, to me just legends. They'd competed in it in the past, and really accomplished pilots, and you know, they're kind of like the Kelly Slaters of our sport. And you know, we all had moments in that race that were really terrifying. And just to get to Monaco, you've got to kind of, you still try to do it in a way that you're going to make it, but I think we all pushed it at some point, probably too hard. And I think, you know, hopefully that's when the training and that's when all the practice and all that stuff comes through, and you know, you're playing a numbers game that's reasonable. But if you keep pushing that in this sport, it's, you know, the end is inevitable. So it's a really fine line.
Let's talk a couple things. So one is, you're like, we know you have a serious history as ski racer, like You know, your ski racing friends, 9 surgeries. So we know you're inside. If you were my athlete, I would be like, inside of your knees are like white balls of perfect shiny light. That would be the image I would tell you. And then secretly we'd be like, oh my God, they look like garbage dumps inside, right? But I would tell you they're white balls of light. Yeah. So tell me, so you say, hey, I'm not a runner. You say this of your own volition. You know that you have knees that have less tolerance for this silliness. What were the keys around your mechanics and even nutrition or lifestyle that really said, hey, here's what I need to do to get ready? That's the first question. So help us understand that as the aging athlete, because what we're seeing now is a generation of athletes who've come of age in this extreme sport environment, right? And now are very, very competent and don't take big risks. I mean, you're not talking about like wing shooting. I mean, like we're talking about pressing skills and abilities. You know, Laird Hamilton is one of our friends, and he's 50, and I would say that he is the best surfer now than he's ever been. Yeah. He's never been a better surfer, right? And he's taken all of those decades, and now he's culminating that and chasing some of these really, really big open ocean waves, right? So by the time you're our age, we have some hard miles theoretically because we didn't know what we know and we did some stupid stuff or you crashed on your skis once or twice. Tell us about the process that you went, or the keys to your success for being able to handle that crazy amount of volume. Because I've run one ultra marathon, 150K, and I was done. I mean, my knees didn't hurt, but I was like, this is brutal, much less do it again and again. So talk about your keys of performance there, would you?
Well, yeah, and I think the real key, too, to understand, because I wouldn't have been able to do it. There's one guy in the race, they call him the running man. He's done all of them from Romania, Toma Cocanea, who jogs. You know, he run when he's on the flats, he's running. And you got your pack. This race, you have to carry everything: your ring, your harness, your helmet, your safety gear, your radio, all the stuff that there's like mandatory equipment that you have to carry the whole way. So, but for the most part, nobody runs. You're just walking really fast. You're doing your military walking. So it's 13-minute miles was what we were shooting for, even when it was going up or going down. So that's what we were training towards, is being able to walk fast basically forever, and not getting really tired or worn out, but mostly protecting the joints.
So how did you do that? Like, what are your keys to performance to like protect your joints? What does that look like?
Yeah, I've got to bring Ben Abruzzo into the conversation now. He was my trainer. He was my Kelly Starrett for the race. I contacted him months before I even had applied to the race, just to see, like, hey, he and I have done a lot of skiing together and paragliding and speed flying, and very good friend. But I knew his background as he was in the military. He led platoons in Iraq. He's just a total badass. He owns a CrossFit gym down in Albuquerque, and so I knew that I needed help. I've been an athlete my whole life, but I had no idea how to train for an event like this. And like I said, again, because I'm not a runner as well, and that's just I've never been an endurance athlete at all. I'm a sprinter, and so I contacted him months and months before and just said, is this possible? And without even flinching, he had the white light knee thing, with my knees too, but without even flinching, he was like, yes, we can train you. And so the serious training started a little bit more than 9 months before the event. So October 1st, we kind of got down to business. I live in Sun Valley, he lives in Albuquerque, and basically every week he would put up my training program on Google Docs. And it was kind of broken down into three-month periods. So the first 3 months was really based around where is Gavin's base, but it was building a base for the hell that was coming, and that was a lot of strength training, a lot of either CrossFit or CrossFit-like training, and a lot of mellow. I would look back and say at the time I thought it was pretty hard vertical, but it was a lot of vertical, it was a lot of going up mountains and a lot of walking, but nothing like what was coming. Like a typical day in October would have been like 10K on the ground with my pack, on like rolling terrain, and then maybe 2,000 feet of vertical, and then maybe another 10K. So a decent workout, but nothing like what was coming down the road. And then a lot of strength training, a lot of squats, a lot of Zercher squats, a lot of sandbag training. I just did get-ups coming out the ass, like, just sandbag on a shoulder down to the ground and back up. That was based around, the theory there was not only just building the building the strength around my knees, but also the core for what was coming with the pack. You know, he wanted me to have, you know, really good posture during the race, so things wouldn't, you know, things downstream wouldn't go to hell. So the beginning was a lot of strength. The other thing I just want to like emphasize that the big thing for me was, you know, could I have done it on my own? Or most of the athletes do it on their own, and I find that, you know, you either overtrain or undertrain depending on your personality if you do it on your own. But it sucks. It's boring. You don't really know. You never know if you're doing enough or if you're doing too little. Like, I was surprised how much rest there was. You know, I don't think I wouldn't have felt comfortable on my own going, oh, I'm going to take a day off. That just wouldn't have felt right. But, you know, he had. Basically, his was, you know, it was always 3 weeks of increasing intensity, with the third week was the hardest, and then a fourth week that was kind of based towards recovery, and then the next month would be harder. And then moving into January, those 3 months was just a ton of interval training. So we were doing a lot of ramping, you know, getting my red line much, much higher, spending a lot of time in the gym with intervals, and then spending a lot of time outdoor. That was when we had snow here in Sun Valley, so a ton of ski touring, but the ups would always be like 10 minutes of just mellow, and then 60-60s or 30-30s, where it was just like you just wanted to vomit at the 30, and then 30 of just maintaining your heart rate. We tracked everything with the Sunto and moves count, so he was every week was evaluating the metrics. You know, I think by the time we got to the race, it was I'd done, I think I even wrote it down here, you know, but yeah, so kind of by April, you know, a typical week would be like 15,000 meters of vertical gain,
Cool.
150 kilometers on the ground. That was kind of a typical week.
There's something in there I want to show people, just to kind of flesh out, you know, and we've heard, you know, Jeremy Jones has said, hey, look, there's only one thing that gets you in shape for carrying a pack in the mountains, and that's carrying a pack in the mountains. And you know, if we that's not to say that you can't strength train, you can't be more efficient, you can't improve your mechanics, but at some point you need to go do your sport. And I think there's this idea. One is that what you're seeing around this, or what I'm hearing, is that you're spending a lot of time actually doing the sport, which is carrying a pack, making sure that you can, you know, your tissues and ligaments and your feet and everything is just used to actually doing the sport. There's sometimes in the modern training world, there's this idea that, like, you don't have to do your sport. If you just go to the gym a whole bunch, you don't have to ride your bike, and that's a lot. No one believes that.
Yeah,
right?
no, and you know, it was funny. I got a reputation around town for, like, who's that weirdo with the tights? Like, it is a small town, but everybody knew me because there was a lot of time where, you know, in the X-Alps, you spend a lot of time down in the valleys walking on roads, you know, connecting the dots between the next hike up the next morning where you could fly. And so, you know, I spent a lot of time with my pack. You're absolutely right. And you know, in early May, I moved over to Europe to start scouting the course. And May and June, there was a long taper at the end of June, you know, to prepare. The race started July 5th, but the last 3 months of the training was a lot of the sport, you know, just a lot of going up. We wanted to do very little down to no down, because I really don't have the knees for down. Down's horrible. But, you know, like kind of April, May, we would do series, 3 or 4 day series that were basically meant to emulate the race. So they would be 4,000 meters of vertical, fly as much as you could in the day, and then walk till 11 p.m. You know, so like 5 hours of walking. So these were meant to kind of emulate real race conditions. But he stressed that a lot. You know, like on times where I felt like, you know, hey, you know, it's a really good fly day today, Ben. I think I should go fly. He was like, yeah, this isn't you need to fly. That is, you know, the best pilot wins the race. And so, yeah, that was. I just can't overemphasize enough how important it was to have somebody directing all of that. Yes. Because the other thing too is you become beholden to them. He'd put all this effort into, you know, making the Google Docs and thinking about it and looking at the metrics. There was no freaking way I was ever going to say no. There was no, I mean, my rule for my own personal rule, which I think he really appreciated, was I never questioned what he had me do ever, and I never said no. It was, you know, we sometimes we'd have to switch up the days, or I did a lot of travel last winter, you know, also in training, and we Banff Film Festival, we do a lot of stuff with Red Bull, so, you know, there was a lot of things that I just had, I mean, I still had life to live, and so he would just, you know, adapt for that and put up things like, hey, if you're in a hotel room, you could do this, or you could do this. And, you know, if you've got a place where you can go do some yoga, like I really like yoga just once a week just to kind of keep flexible and stuff, go do yoga. So, I mean, it was just really adaptive, and it changed, and it was, I can't tell you how much fun it was. It sounds like hell.
No, it doesn't. Well,
but it was like, I think we did, by the time of the race start, I'd done 2,000 kilometers on the ground and done 200,000 meters of vertical. And that sounds like hell, but it was, I can't tell you what a gift that was and how fun it was. Just, A, to know you could do it. Like, I went in the race knowing I could do the race and knowing that it wasn't going to break me. And there was a lot of guys that were not feeling that way. There's 32 athletes in these things, and they're all amazing. But, you know, looking around at the eyes before the race, you could tell there was a lot of people that were freaked. We were all freaked to some extent, but I knew my body wasn't going to fail. And that's
so this brings up something, because training, we should be able to exceed any athletic demand, any aerobic demand. These are all known factors. So it really is about, you know, we want to put people into a position where the best athlete wins. You know, the most technical flyer wins, the best skier wins, the best whatever. It's not, you know, the fitness shouldn't be the known quantity. And I think, you know, I've come of age, you know, as a strength conditioning physical therapist, where, you know, we have really come to believe that true. Also, though, I really love hearing, hey, I'm 43. I have this, you know, I've been an athlete my whole life. You know, clearly you didn't just come off the couch. You know, and one of the things that we really like for people to do with their fitness and their bodies is be able to say, hey, look, I have this goal. You know, my wife is training for the Molokai World Championships in September.
Cool.
People are like, you know, how long have you been training? She's like, oh, I've been, you know, since last November, I've been really given it. So she's had like 10 months of really dedicated training for this big race. But the last, you know, 15 years or 13 years of CrossFit, years of being an athlete before, you know, this is the longest training period of all time to do this 1 6-hour race. And I think people forget that in that physical practice all the time, we're trying to always keep a ready state of aerobic work, of strength work, of skill work, so that then you can quickly tool it and go do something. I mean, that's without being a professional athlete. I mean, that idea. Did you find that besides the focus training, did you have to develop skills that you didn't have before? Like, were you squatting? Were you doing some of this base aerobic work?
That's it. You know, it was kind of cool. It was like a return to my base. You know, I for years and years and years, I ran a sailboat around the world for 13 years, and, you know, done a lot of other sports. And, you know, for a long time, I avoided the gym. You know, I had never done any CrossFit until maybe 2 years ago, and that was, you know, but I had been a professional athlete. I had been a skier, so I had spent a lot of time in the gym. I had done a lot of Olympic lifting. And so returning to it was actually really fun. But like you said, I mean, I've always been an athlete. I've always been fit. I didn't like have to come off the couch to do this. But I've never done, you know, even back in those ski racing days, you know, it's hard to say because I was in my teens, and, you know, you're invincible back then, right? But and I always took my training back then very seriously, and I was kind of known in the ski world as being very, very fit and very strong, because I was smaller. I needed an advantage on the bigger guys because I'm just not a very big guy, so I needed to train harder. But you know, this was, I've never taken on anything like this, and I honestly can say now I'm in the best shape of my life. And I mean, I've been living with knee pain for 20 years. No matter what I did, my knees have always hurt, and they don't hurt anymore. And so that's remarkable. I'm still kind of blown away by that. So, but I think that your question back to kind of like the mechanics were there, but it was pretty interesting going through it, how much he stressed that. And also, as the months went by, we were training so much that, you know, I started becoming very careful about, you know, the last thing I want to do right now is get hurt. I've got all this training going forward. But the coolest thing, Kelly, was feeling like I did back when I was 18. I got to the point where I felt like I was invisible. I felt like I could just take my bike and smash into a tree, and I knew I'd bounce off it. My body just became like one. I don't know. It was remarkable where he got me to be. It was a really fun journey.
Oh, so I love hearing that. And
God, it was awesome. One
of the things that I have spent a few hours in a fly tank at Skydive Arizona, and I've even got to do a hey-ho, which is a high altitude, high opening. Jumped out at 20,000 feet on oxygen, and
nice.
And I've had that experience a little bit. And it's interesting. One of the things that doesn't resonate with me, like some of our friends, we just interviewed Jimmy Chin and Connor Anker, and big exposure on the rock sketches me out. It just doesn't feel good. It really is like, I don't love it. I don't dig it. I can do it, but I cleaned my friends' routes in Boulder and hated it. I'm just like, I don't like this. But there is something about flying at that exposure that melts that away. Like it really is different, that it's not scary sitting in a harness and flying. And something you spoke to that I really liked is, my friends who are climbers, I would describe them as craftsmen. Like climbing a really tricky route is like building a table out of wood by hand and measuring and polishing and fitting. And I just don't have the tolerance for it all. I'm a whitewater kayaker. I'm reacting to what's happening and making decisions. And I feel, and I'm not saying that sport is extraordinarily amazing, but the flying definitely resonates more with me because of that spontaneity. One of the things that I think is relevant is we are always asking people to have depth and breadth in their practice and play, and even if we go into CrossFit, the original tenet is, hey, you should be constantly learning new skills and playing new sports. Like that is a lifetime of learning. You have, you run a sailing charter where you take people kite surfing. It seems to me that you have some really lots and diverse backgrounds, and all of those things make you a better pilot. Can you just talk about like some of the other aspects of flying? Because we're always looking at lateralization. What other skills make me better at what I'm doing? How do I deal with fear, or how do I practice those experiences? Can you just talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, it's funny you bring up Jimmy Chin and Conrad and those guys. Just last week, I have a podcast as well, and kind of dedicated to flying, to human flight, and sat down with Cedar Wright. He's done a lot of stuff with Alex Honnold and all those guys, total badass climber, and he got the paragliding bug, something fierce this spring, and he's just gotten into it, and he calls it, for him, it's the greatest adventure he's ever had, because it's kind of the ultimate freedom machine. When you talk about climbing, you're absolutely right. That craft and that intensity, and people talk about it's kind of like a runner's high, where climbers talk about being 1,000 feet off the deck and getting so into the zone that you see like a little flower, and it's just the most beautiful thing there is. There's some combination of endorphins and adrenaline, and and you get addicted to that. And paragliding to me, more than anything else, is like it's like meditation. I meditate and I suck at it, and it's just so hard to like get in the moment. That's what we're all trying to do, is like get in the moment. In paragliding, it's quite intense, and it is very dangerous. And so when you're flying, there's no other place you can be. You have to be in the moment. And so, but training for it can be, this last month we've had too much wind every day. I haven't been able to get in the air. So you need other CrossFit, you need other things you need other sports to pursue that kind of help you train and help you become a better pilot. Slacklining is fantastic, which sounds weird, but that balance and that center on core and just that movement is actually really similar to what we do in a harness. And you're also kind of training your brain to deal with the fear of falling. So kite surfing, sailing, anything that has to do with the wind, I never put that together necessarily back, when I was doing all that, but certainly that must help a lot, understanding how a wing works. And there are guys that are a lot of pilots are engineers or physics professors. I don't know why that is, but and I don't have the kind of brain that thinks about things like that. But you hear engineers talk about flying paragliders, and they really get into the technical aspect of the wing and how the shape and how you're how you're moving in this invisible world. And so it's fantastic talking to them about that. But for me, it's just it's the freest thing I do. But training for it is multifaceted. Climbing. When you start off, you're never lead climbing, right? You're always top roping, and then eventually you get to that point where, okay, I want to start doing some lead climbing, and then it's not so much the strength and the agility and the flexibility, it's the head. You start getting above that last bolt, and you got to not panic, to lead climb. And paragliding is kind of the same thing. People always say, oh my God, it must be so scary to be 18,000 feet high. That's not what's scary. It's scary being next to the ground. You don't get hurt up high in the air. You've got plenty of time to deal with things when things go bad up high, but it's being near the terrain. And you have to make moves near the terrain when you're cross-country flying. You always leave from a cloud base. You leave high, hopefully, but then wherever you're getting, you get there low, and that's when accidents can happen. So a lot of it's here. I mean, the sport of paragliding actually isn't very physical at all. There's a lot of people that can, that can do the sport and not be in very good shape. When you start adding the BIV aspect of it, like BIV flying, when you're carrying everything and walking, or certainly the X-Alps, it becomes a very physical endeavor.
Well, and I have to say the mental piece, we have a slackline in our little home gym, and where I always sometimes jump on as part of my warm-up, but I also always get on when I'm done training to see how messed up I am.
Yes.
Like we got back from a long bike ride yesterday, Juliet and I jumped down there, and I was like, look at how sloppy I am and disintegrated I am. And I was trying to pull those things back together. And what it always shows me is sometimes it's difficult to appreciate how important the base fitness is around your nervous system or ability to focus or pay attention or perceive. And that when you fatigue, people are like, yeah, I get hurt. When did you get hurt skiing? Oh, the last run of the day. And I'm like, well, weird. You were all sloppy and weak, and you couldn't feel what was going on and lost control. And it has to be a little bit, it's interesting to hear you say about really going to the aerobic well, because one of the theories I have, is that as I have gotten older, I have decided that, like, hey, I'm strong enough as an athlete. In fact, I don't want to get bigger. My numbers are good, but what I feel like I've had to put a ton of energy into is this aerobic fitness. Can I, be 2 days out there? Can I, raft or kayak or do something and then still be very technically good? And what I'm finding is, it takes a lot more investment in the aerobic package, and that's a little bit more interesting conversation now than how much I can deadlift and squat. Not that I don't deadlift and squat a lot, but that this other thing. And I've seen that, a lot of our athletes in our 40s have really, realizing that you have to nurture that aerobic base and have it be really fluent there, because it really sets you up for being able to do more of everything. And I'm not just talking about junk miles at all. At all. That's not what I'm saying. It's hard, scary work to go do 60-60s. I mean, just when you kind of threw that out there, I'm like, just let someone take that on for a minute, do a 60 second outputs. I mean, that is hard aerobic work.
Yeah, and and it was really interesting when we transitioned to the aerobics part of it, which I guess I was just reading Ben's blog about the training. He has a great blog on his website called thesnowgoat.com for anybody that's interested. But he wrote a great piece on his philosophy and how he got me to the race start. And we got into the aerobic base, kind of the endurance section of it, much earlier than I think you typically would. It was interesting that you said strong enough. He emphasized that a lot. Like, we only need you strong enough. And the aerobic base part, that was really January through March, was hours and hours and hours of like heart rate at 130, where I'd just be on the treadmill with my pack, to give my knees a break from the concrete. Looked like an asshole in the gym, but it would just be it was quite boring work, because you're just hours at 130, where you can talk, you can have a conversation. It's not hard. can't tell you how valuable that was, though, for everything else. And I think the other thing that the training, what it does is after a few months, you get so in tune with, like you say, ooh, man, this doesn't feel good on the slack line right now. What's going on? So, like during the race, they allow you to move between 5:30 and 10:30, and then one time you have a night pass where you can go all night. And I actually had won a second night pass for the Prelude. They had an initial race 3 days before that was like a Tour de France kind of thing, and I got top 3 in that. So those top 3 people had a second night pass. So I actually had 2, but anyway, that you're allowed to move between 5:30 and 10:30, and we just made it a strict rule that we would stop every night at 10:15. He would have my mat all laid out, all my mobility stuff right there, and we're going to do the mobility. You don't care how tired you are, don't care how much sleep you need. You've got to spend this 15 minutes. Because I had done that through the whole training. And, I mean, every day I did that stuff. And I'm convinced that that's why I have no pain, and that's why, I could come in and he wouldn't be like, okay, do this, this, and this. I knew. Okay, I got to do my feet, man. I need to roll out my feet. I got to smash my quads. I got to pay attention to my posterior chain, and just bang, 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 bam. I'm asleep. And then, the dividends that would pay in the morning were enormous. So you get to this point where you're just like, there were a lot of times in the training where I was just like, Ben, I don't have it today. I got to do today's workout tomorrow. I feel like shit. Whatever. I didn't eat well enough, or and we kept track of all the food as well. I would always put that back.
Huge.
And that was a huge part of it. And during the race, that was a huge part of it. But again, by the time we got to the race, it wasn't like we were trying to fix the Rubik's Cube. We had the pieces put together. It was just like, we knew the calories weren't going to be, we knew I wasn't going to be able to eat enough. There's no way you can eat 9,000, 12,000 calories a day, which is what we were burning. But we had planned for all that. We knew all that. It was never like day 7, I didn't wake up. The coolest thing about the race is, like, there's no other way you can get to that place. Like, serious people that have trained really hard know what that place is. There's only one way to get there. It's to destroy yourself.
You've got to go there.
Special place to be. It's such a cool thing, And day 8, day 9, we got to that place, and it wasn't like, oh fuck, how am I going to get through this? It was just part of the deal. We knew we could get through it. It was a really cool. My feet were trash. That was the only part that sucked.
Everyone's feet are trash. You can't deal with that. I mean, that's the feet are the weak spot. Let me ask you this: what is the thing you crave the most? What food is like the thing you're like, if I can fly and get those cherry gummy bears? Like, what is it? That, like, my friends used to be Cheetos for my friends, or one of my friends was like, she'd have those little chocolate donuts. I think it was Rebecca Rush would have these little powdered donuts, and like, she'd have one powdered donut. She'd be like, it's gonna be okay. I got another 3 days. What
was this sounds disgusting. It was Coke. I don't drink soft drinks ever. Like, I don't drink Red Bull, and I don't drink soft drinks, and I don't like them. They're too sugary. But man, on that race, he'd hand me a Coke, and it was just like, oh, dude, I love you. That Coke. Coke was big. Pickles. And where that was from, that was, Ben's done the death race and the world's toughest mudder, and he'd done a lot of this stuff on his own, and he's trained a lot of athletes for like ultrathon type stuff, and so he knew pickles were amazing. I actually had a hard time the whole race, like, Bruce, my other supporter, my kind of tactician strategy guy, he was doing all the cooking, and for the most part, even like at night after I hadn't been walking, my heart rate was totally normal. Food was hard. I didn't really like food. It just was, but all day I ate so many goos and shot blocks, and when my heart rate was up, especially when I was going uphill, I couldn't process any real food. So then it was just carbs and sugar, and I ate that stuff till I just got sick of it. But it always was good. It always worked. In the air, I ate a lot. Our strategy was when I was in the air, so when my heart rate was just totally normal, except from the adrenaline side of things, that's when I could eat real stuff. So I'd always launch with like a big sandwich, a lot of avocados. I loved avocados, but a lot of avocados, a big sandwich, banana, big protein bar. That was always like, I'd try to eat as much as I could in the air, so when I landed, I was ready to go again, and then I could go back to the goos and stuff. But Patagonia Provisions, I'll throw these guys into it. They're one of my sponsors, but they gave me a huge box of smoked salmon, and then they've got these fantastic little like apricot bars and all these non-GMO, really great organic bars. And so pretty much every night I'd have a huge mountain of pasta covered with the smoked salmon. And that, you know, in my head I thought, the smoked salmon, that must be good for the joints, you know, with the omegas and the oils. And, you know, who knows if that actually was true or not. But that was one of my kind of really go-to meals for sure. In the morning, like a ridiculous amount of eggs, you know, a dozen eggs, bunch of sausage, grease, nasty, you know. But it also depended on the country. In Austria, I was eating Wiener Schnitzel. That was pretty exciting, you know. In Italy, you eat anything because it's just so fantastic. In Switzerland, I didn't want to eat a thing because they suck. They have the worst food in the world. But, you know, in Italy, it was just like, you know, I'd get on the phone when I was flying and make sure you guys have a couple pizzas for me. I remember one night, the last night, I pulled my pass the last night of the race, and I was trying to get to Monaco, and you know, I landed right at night. You can fly between 6 p.m. or 6 a.m. and 9 p.m. I landed literally seconds before 9 p.m. I'd had this amazing flight across a couple big coals and down into the Asolo Valley, and I had about 65K as the crow flies to the waypoint, which ended up being about 110 kilometers, and I did all that on the ground. So the last push was brutal. I started walking at 9 p.m. and ended the next day at like 6 p.m. It was 110 kilometers, a lot of vertical, and it was over 100 degrees. It was really hot. And like that night at 2 a.m., you know, at one of our little coordinated stops with the van, they brought out these 2 big pizzas, and it was just like, oh God, they were so good. But
let me ask you this: will you do this race again?
Yes, yeah. You know, that's up until the race. Everybody kept asking me like, "Would you ever do this again?" And it was like, "Fuck no, no way I would ever do this again." It's crazy. Even by that point, I was like, you know, this is really what a gift to have nothing to do for 9 months except focus on health. You know, so I started really transitioning to like, wow, this is really fun. And then the whole race, barring that last 100K, which was just brutal. But again, that was because of my feet. It wasn't because of my body. My feet were really in bad shape by that point. They were just one big giant blister. But the whole way through the race, you know, like Ben and Bruce they just gave each other shit constantly. They never stopped laughing. They were the most amazing team and really good at it. You know, we were a rookie team on Euro turf, and that tends to really play well to the Europeans and not.
There are like 80,000 European flyers, and there's like 6,000 U.S. flyers. I mean, the depth over in Europe is insane.
It's insane. It's a big deal over there. This is Red Bull's most famous, most successful media event they do, which is remarkable, like bigger than Baumgartner's jump. They get a massive amount of traffic. It's all on live tracking. It's really cool, the technology they have. It. We all wear heart rate monitors for the whole race, and you can see all this stuff online. So people get really addicted, even if they're not pilots. They watch this, they go like, oh my God. But the whole way across the Alps, we just kept talking about the next one. You know, because we made a lot of mistakes, and as you would, you know, as a rookie team, and everybody makes mistakes, but, you know, we made a lot of mistakes, and we were able to recover them really with the ground game. And then I had a couple of really big flights that were very creative and very different than what everybody else did. And that, you know, like one day I moved, day 8, I think I was in 18th place, and we'd been way up in the front in the very beginning and had a series of really bad days. I was back down in 18th place and had a huge flight, took a very different route past the Matterhorn and almost to Mont Blanc and moved back up to 7th. So that was, you know, to share that with your team. And those guys arrived that day when I landed, and they were just on the moon, as I was. You know, it was 8 hours in the air and really just spectacular flying. But yeah, we're already planning it. You know, we're already talking about the next one, and that's good. You know, I'm going to be 45 for that race, and that's a really neat thing to have. Something that's so intensely physical that you would really think would favor, you know, 30-year-olds.
Oh no!
Yes.
No.
Get better as a pilot. You know, you just get better.
I always will bet on the wily old guy, right? And I mean old in quotation marks as the wily old guy, because you know, just you're hard to beat. You just, you know, a lot of the athletes we know who are competing or playing at that game, you know, they don't fail. You know, they're just they have the fortitude. They know how to suffer. I mean, I'll use my wife as an example. Like when Juliet goes to the well, you know, she has been, you know, rowing on a rowing team, you know, doing some kind of thing like that since she was like 13 years old. Like she's been out suffering and then just working harder than everyone else forever. And it's just like, that's a girl who's hard to beat, you know, or we know it's going to get done. Well, Gavin, how do we find out? This is so, I'm such a nerd for this. It's been so fun. How do we find out? Are you on Facebook? Where's your website? Yeah. Tell us how we can see all the crazy stuff, because your photography up there is outstanding. Where can we see that stuff?
Yeah, so my website for the flying aspect of things is cloudbasedmayhem.com.
Cloud-based mayhem or cloud-based mayhem?
Cloudbasedmayhem.com, and that's I have a great podcast on that where I talk to the best pilots in the world and kind of dissect what makes them great, and then tons of photos, a lot of the video work that we've been doing with Red Bull and Outside TV and stuff over the years. So that's all on that site. You can find me on Facebook, Gavin N. McClurg, my Facebook page. And then my most kind of active social thing is Instagram. My partner is an amazing photographer. She does a lot of stuff for National Geographic and Red Bull and Outside and stuff. So my Instagram my Instagram account's pretty active, and that's Gavin McClurg. So any of those three. I'm on Twitter, but I don't even know really much about Twitter. So
we don't even know Twitter's gonna be around next month. So no CEO. That's the problem.
Right. Right. Yeah. So any of those three, I'm always open for a conversation. As you can tell, I love talking about paragliding. So if anybody wants to connect to me through that or is interested in getting into it, then please reach out.
Well, dude, thank you so much. This was so killer. Can't wait to find out what you guys are doing next. Let's stay in touch. Let's have you back on, and way to hold the torch for us beat up, old, used up guys who suddenly are like, hey, there's a way, and we can repurpose this thing into being the best in the world. I mean, it really is. It's incredible, man. Thank you so much.
Thank you. I really appreciate it. Like I said, your book went a lot of places in the last year with me, and it really saved my ass. It was a great introduction to what you're doing, and it just became. I've got everything written down here, all the stuff that I do every day, and it's just
maybe we can talk you into sometime when you're on a flight. Pull it out, take a picture at like 18,000 feet on oxygen with the book, and we'll just make that the next cover.
That'd be great, man. That'd be great. Yeah,
dude, you are the best. Thank you so much, man.
It's a real honor. Thanks for having me on the show. I really appreciate it. Thank you.